Hello and welcome everyone to our session on what's next to invest in the future of your business. For this instalment, we'll be looking at employee attraction and retention. So a real focus on reward, recruitment and retention. Now this is halfway through our what's next sessions, and we're very lucky to have a number of people join us today to share their insight and experience in these areas. My name's Ian Goodwin. I'm a partner at Mazar, and I'm in the employment taxes team, advising on all sorts of things from termination payments, salary sacrifice, through to things like travel and temporary workplace, etc. But I'm very, very lucky to be joined by my colleagues Jane Gilmore, a national minimum wage expert, Christian Fell in our people consulting team, Robbie White, who looks at training and skills and apprenticeships. And we're extremely fortunate to have Georgia Cowan with us from Gately's to provide some employment law experience and advice on this call as well. So it's great to have all those individuals with us today, and we look forward to hearing from them on the questions we will ask. Now, this is a session where we'd love you to ask questions. Please do use the comments box if you've come in through Zoom. The Q&A box if you've come in through Zoom, and use the comments box if you come in through LinkedIn Live. So just to repeat that, the Q&A box if you've come in through Zoom, and the comments box if you come in through LinkedIn Live. It's really great to have everyone here today to listen to us. So I suppose, why are we here? Well, and who are Mazar and who are Gately's? Well, you've got Mazar is a global partnership that advises on tax, advisory services and audit for approximately 47,000 people worldwide in 95 countries and territories. And we partnered with Gately's on this because we thought there'd be some synergies between employment law, employment tax, reward, skills and training. It's a real area where employers really need to know what they're looking at from perspective of, well, what's the best way to set that reward package up? What do we need to think about from a compliance perspective here from both a legal and a tax angle? So we thought it was a really good area to come in together. And Gately's are a practice that are in the UK. They've got over 1,400 employees in the UK, and they were the first legal firm to be listed on the AIM market in the UK as well. And it's great to have them on board with us today. The reason, again, while we're talking about this, is we've seen from our C-suite surveys that one of the top priorities for businesses has been to recruit and retain and attract the right talent. Businesses don't seem to be able to think they can get to where they want to go to if they don't have that talent on board. And that's, I suppose, something that we'd expect to see. From the survey we did, 25% of the execs, so this is their top priority, to make sure they can attract the right people, and 28% of they need to make sure the right skills are in the business. So this is a real key topic for organizations to focus on and to make sure they can get the right practical and sound advice. Now, to start with, let's get to the questions really here, and let's get our guests talking about their experience and expertise on this area. So I'm going to kick off with, how do we build a compelling proposition and a base model to really start our business going and to recruit and retain the right type of individuals? And I'm going to start with Christian from our consulting team to start to answer that question. So over to you, Christian.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I mean, it's such an interesting question because I think over the last few years, we've all been speaking about just how important people are to our organizations, whatever industry you're operating in. It's the people that can really facilitate those marginal gains. It's the people that drive you towards where it is that you're hoping to go. But maybe if I just start by addressing what is an EVP, what is an employer value proposition? And it's really the way in which you as a company are looking to attract and acquire the employees that have the skill sets to meet your organizational strategy. So why is it important? And I think it's important because as a population, employees, candidates out in the market are becoming much more open to exploring where it is that they want to go with their career. They really want to understand the bottom line of who you are as an organization. What is your personality? What do you stand for? What are your values and mission? And therefore, as an organization, it's more important than ever that we're transparent and we really communicate and understand who we are. What do we want to stand for, and what are the type of candidates that we are looking to attract? And I think there's a couple of ways that as an organization, you can really try and drive that at the minute. And I'll just list a couple. One of them is really engaging with your employees. In retail, we often talk about the voice of the customer and understanding who are the people that are walking through your shop door. But understanding your employees and understanding the people that you're looking to join your business is really the first step. And having those open, transparent conversations with them will really put you in a good place to know who you are and where you're going. Secondly, it's really getting that senior sponsorship. I think across all organizations, if we can get the C-suite speaking about what we want to be and what our proposition should be, again, it gives confidence to those in the business. And then just finally, it's really that consistent communication. I think that what we've seen over the last couple of years is that it's very easy to say what you want to be, and it's great to have an aspiration as to who you want to be, but it's really got to resonate with your employees as well, and trying to close that gap between what we're saying and what we're actually doing is really critical. And then, of course, there are opportunities to really start to quantify our success. So quantifying our success as an employer, and whether that's through engagement scores, productivity, or attrition rates, again, it really helps us then understand where we are on our journey.
And is there, Christian, anything like you've seen from a communication perspective that's been really successful for organisations there to really kind of set the tone and help employees and bring employees on board?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some really interesting strategies employed, particularly over the last couple of years. And of course, we saw many organizations pivot from their communications pre the pandemic to being in a much more virtual world.
Yeah.
But I think it's two things. One, it's consistency of your communication. I think that if we can get into a routine of how we're communicating and why we're communicating, and really give employees confidence that they're going to be receiving the right information at the right time, that builds the trust. And I think trust is a really critical part of employee engagement. And secondly, it's the transparency around it. Now, we've all got to be realistic that you can't share everything with everyone, but knowing who you should share what with is really important. And going through a matrix approach and figuring that out is certainly something that can really facilitate meaningful communication.
Thank you, Christian. And turning to Robbie, what have you seen here from a training and skills perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things I'll say. I think what Christian was mentioning there around the importance of our employees and understanding them, really listening to what people want is super crucial. There is no point in having an employee value proposition which doesn't put the employee at the heart of what we're trying to do. And a key to everybody at the moment is just being able to have the skills required to do what's necessary on a day-to-day basis. If we look at the speed of change that's going on around us, I think we're all aware of it. Coming out of the pandemic, it's been absolutely incredible to see the amount of change. And things like AI are fundamentally changing the work that we do today. In order to support the teams to pick this up, they need the skills training available to them. And there are so many different ways that we can do this, But at the core, it needs to come to the culture. It needs to be part of the culture of every organization that we consider learning. We consider that a part of everything that we do every single day. We also need to think about, what's happening around us. There is no point in just looking internally and insular without considering the wider market. Our competitors in whatever space you are going to be doing things, and being able to respond to those is crucial. So being aware of the wider market and what's going on inside of that wider market is key, as well as the technology. When I've mentioned AI already, and I'm sure it's a key talking point for many at the moment, but the technology in the space is fundamentally changing what people do. And as an employer, we need to consider, how does that impact our people, and how does that impact their experience also inside of the firm. The last thing that I would touch on briefly, Ian, and I know it's a key thing for us, is the regulation and how regulation impacts the process that we need to follow for engaging with people. We need to consider the diversity of our workforce. We know this, and we've known this for a long time. But at the same time, regulatory income, considerations around national minimum wage and considerations around just constant changing regulation are key aspects of how you pull together your value proposition, and more importantly, the value that employees will see from that.
That's great, Robbie, and really good time to bring up the national minimum wage too, and look at ways actually, once you've created that EVP, that value proposition, how do you protect it and what do you need to look at protecting it from? So I think at this stage, it's great to bring in Jane to have a look at, well, what do we need to keep an eye on to make sure we can protect our reputation and enhance the business to recruit and retain the right people? Jane, be great to hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so yeah, as Christian and Robbie have just been talking about, it's really important how important our people are within our business and to value them. So yeah, national minimum wage, of course, it's got its challenges. How do you assure that you're meeting all your compliance obligations in light of all of the risks that are that are out there, such as working time? We're seeing that becoming very much of a focus within HMRC inquiries, getting down to the nitty-gritty detail of how do you record and monitor actual working time, and making sure that your employees are being remunerated correctly for it. Deductions as well are coming into it. Are they having to buy equipment for work, shoes, uniform? We've all seen the naming and shaming list with the high profile names on there being caught out for the black shoes and trousers. Even down to things, salary sacrifice, great schemes and arrangements that they are for the, the savings that they can make, but it also can have a huge impact on employees being able to join those schemes when they're on the lower pay scales. We're all seeing HMRC out there being very much active in their enforcement activity. Me previously being one of those HMRC officers, I'm fully aware of what they're looking at and how they go about those approaches, but it's very challenging. There are huge financial penalties where an employer may very innocently get it wrong. The rules are complex, so that you not only make sure that you're getting it right, you've got to understand the rules and regulations as well. And also the naming as well. It's not just a financial penalty. There's the pleasure of being named in the media for getting it wrong, and there's no explanation as to why that breach may have occurred. It is, you've fallen foul, you're named, and that's the end of that. So we're all waiting eagerly for the new NMW rates to be announced, which hopes to be later this month in the autumn statement. Early indications being that they're going to be at least £11 an hour, in light of the real living wage just being up to £12 an hour. It's probably going to, well, my personal opinion, it's going to be, more to the higher end of the low pay commission's predictions of around £11.40, around that area. So another challenge, how do employers, build in that increase and maintain pay differentials and reward employees as well. So yeah, they've got huge challenges ahead of them. And we're also seeing something, new that's coming in. It's not so much new, but it's getting more of a focus. Sorry, excuse me. Is around directors and shareholders. In their non-exec roles, are they paying them sufficiently to make sure that they're not falling foul of minimum wage as well? So it's just something to be mindful of, because we're seeing it come up in due diligence, where directors think that they're paying themselves dividends, but actually they're very involved in their day-to-day running of the business. So is their salary sufficient to cover them for that time at minimum wage? So a lot of things to think about on national minimum wage, and lots of challenges ahead.
So it's something that can definitely make your mind tick around by the sounds of it, Jane. And that it sounds like you could potentially have an issue where you've set up a fantastic EVP, where you've got a great reward proposition for your team, but actually that could potentially create some NMW issues at time. For instance, if you're allowing people to buy goods through the salary deductions potentially, or use the canteen, or even put some salary sacrifice arrangements in that actually increase net pay but have an impact on taxable and nickable pay. So it's something definitely to keep mindful of. I'd agree. I think just looking at risk and things like that, bringing in Georgia from a legal perspective, what are you seeing at the moment for areas where businesses have built a CVP and what they need to do to protect it, and what's some of the hot topics there at the moment?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, and lovely to be joining you all at Mazars. One really hot topic at the minute is holiday pay, and I know it's a topic that's been discussed quite a lot. There was a case that was in the Supreme Court last month, actually, so it's quite interesting that we've got the judgment, and it's Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland versus Agnew. And I won't go into the details of the case. I know this isn't a legal update, but it raises two really important points, actually. So just as a bit of background, this relates to police officers who are claiming underpayments of holiday pay dating back to 1998. And it's the underpayment was due to holiday pay being calculated as a basic pay only, whereas they were actually working a lot of overtime and receiving additional payments. And that wasn't the challenge in the case, but it is an interesting and really important point to mention that holiday pay is normal remuneration. So it's not just basic pay, but it could be things like regular overtime, regular commission, etc. So that wasn't the dispute in the case, but I thought it was important to mention that today. The actual case itself was the dispute was in relation to whether a series of deductions could be claimed. Now, there's a case called Bear Scotland, which you might have heard of, from 2014, where if there was a break in the chain of deductions, then that was the backstop. And actually what the Supreme Court held, and the judgment was a couple of weeks ago, that there is no break in a series of deductions. And what that means is if you bring in a claim for the holiday pay in relation to, based from the difference between your basic pay and the overtime, in this particular case, that's going back to 1998 now, based on this decision, which is obviously a huge amount of money. You're talking 30 million. Now, in Great Britain, it's a little bit of a better position because there's a backstop of 2 years on how much you can claim. But even then, if someone's regularly earning quite a lot of overtime, they could claim all that period for up to 2 years. And if you're thinking of, big employers who have regular employees doing this, it could be a costly amount. So I think it's definitely an important decision and something that all employers need to bear in mind from a legal perspective to make sure that they're calculating holiday pay correctly.
Thank you for that, George. That sounds like potentially it could add some financial challenges to businesses in the next few years, by the sounds of it, from how that case has arisen. I think looking at that and thinking about these challenges that businesses have got, we've got inflation that's been creeping up, we've got the interest rate piece at the moment, we've got a war for talent as well. It's a case of, well, how can businesses and organizations stand out from the crowd given that there's these restrictions on them? And I suppose here's what can they do from a cost and compliance perspective to make them look more attractive and to help them recruit and retain. I think, Jane, just looking at some of the areas you may have touched on from a risk perspective, but things that can potentially be brought in to make business more cost effective and more appealing. Do you want to just share some insight there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not always, it doesn't always have to be a financial reward, that you give to employees. I think flexible and hybrid working is a very, it's really appreciated by employees, of having that flexibility of not having to go into work every day. I appreciate it very much. So that's a really good reward to offer. But on the flip side of that, just going back to the working time for national minimum wage purposes, you do need to be sort of on top of that flexible working and hybrid, and making sure that you can, evidence your employees' working time to make sure that they're not falling foul of that. So it's just to that's quite a useful benefit to offer. Ad hoc benefits as well, things like gym memberships, like I say, smart tech. Shopping discounts, they all come in really handy for employees, especially at this time of year now, Christmas coming up, get those discounts out there. But again, when you're offering, things like gym memberships, just making sure that they are via, you know, to a third party, because, you know, anything that's, you know, for employer benefit, you know, could impact on national minimum wage. They're going to get you one way or another. Things like holiday buy schemes as well through salary sacrifice. I mean, there are numerous salary sacrifice schemes out there, but having the option to buy additional holidays, you've got the pension, you know, we've got cycle to work, got electric vehicles, all of those salary sacrifice schemes are going to offer some savings, you know, to employees and employers. But again, on the flip side, just watch how many salary sacrifices employees are joining, because before you know it, they could have no pay left, and again, they're caught for national minimum wage. So it's just being mindful and making sure that you've got those controls in place for eligibility and within your payroll systems as well, that they're all you know, flagged to monitor those things. So just a few from me.
That's great, Jen. I think from taking from what you said there, there's lots of things businesses could potentially do where they've got little room from a cash perspective for pay differentials potentially. And it's, you know, it's thinking about, well, what else is available? I mean, there are things like, you know, share options, both approved and unapproved, that organisations could put in when they potentially got some cash constraints as well, to make sure that they can help retain their best workers. And one area that I've also had from businesses of late is thinking about wider aspects that they could consider. Could there be a holiday bonus scheme whereby employers could offer, say, an extra 5 or 10 days holiday at a future time for people to take, which might tie them into the business better, because that is quite an attractive benefit as well. And also just little things like we've mentioned about you know, staff gifts that you can give on an ad hoc basis that might be tax-free up to £50. Say if you're giving hampers at Christmas, or a bottle of wine or some chocolates for a birthday or something. To the home working allowance, if you've got people working on a flexible basis, you could pay them £26 a month, tax and national insurance free, providing that they're working from home quite regularly. So there's a few little things around the edges that employers can do to just differentiate themselves, from my perspective, to help build a bit of a reward structure there. And I suppose just focusing on that, Georgia, from a legal standpoint, what areas are you seeing there that can be important for businesses to just I suppose bed into their systems?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Jane touched on a couple already in terms of welfare benefits, you know, employee assistance programs, perks at work type benefits, you know, discount on bikes, etc. Ways of working as well, flexible working, and dealing constructively with requests as well, and being open to other arrangements. Also a big one at the minute is family friendly elements of working. So do you have not just maternity and paternity, but adoption pay, you know, adoption policy, sorry, you know, a foster care policy? Are you receptive to those other elements of family friendly, and do you have enhanced schemes? So yeah, and I guess the last point is training and development as well, supporting employees when, if they want to progress, but not obviously pushing them to. And you know, the reason is it's obviously a lot more costly for businesses to constantly be recruiting and training new people than to actually invest in current employees. So yeah, that's a big focus at the minute.
That's great. And we've talked about reward there. The one thing that is missing in this sometimes is training and skills. So Robbie, you know, that's a real attractive thing to offer. I don't know if you just want to focus on that a little bit for us.
Definitely. And I think, you know, I think Georgia points out a great point that, you know, as a value proposition, understanding what people want to learn and how they want to upskill is super important. I think, you know, a benefit for any apprenticeship levy paying organization is that this is, you know, available to you. You can literally draw down on funding that you're already paying into. So in terms of, you know, the cost of this, it's also, you know, massive cost mitigation in many ways, because it's been paid as a levy into the government, and you literally just need to draw that down. The other thing I'd say is that as employees start to look at this, there's, you know, you've got different categories of people inside of your firm, and you need to be able to support everybody. So the ability to go from somebody who's new in career joining to somebody who's, you know, been inside of a firm or inside of an organization for a long time is really, really important. And the thing I love about apprenticeships is that you can do everything from a level 3 to a level 7, which is the equivalent of a master's. In fact, you can do a master's. A degree apprenticeship is, you know, one of the fastest growing areas inside of apprenticeships at the moment. And what we've seen, you know, more and more is that the adoption of apprenticeships has increased since the release of standards. And that the reason for that is because it's become more practical, more applicable, and more useful. on top of that, you know, the ability to skill in multiple areas is crucial. You know, if your firm needs to consider digital transformation and you need people to think about those skills, giving them the option to train on that at no cost to you, at benefit to them, is obviously a massive opportunity. And I will also say that there are, you know, huge amounts to gain from going over the levy as well. You know, the reality is that the levy is fully funded and you can draw down on that from your payments. But once you go over that, you know, that doesn't stop you from training more people. In fact, you know, the government will pay up to 95% of the additional costs over the full apprenticeship amount. So really a crucial thing to consider. I'd also say that the skills boot camps that have been released by the business, many organizations don't know that the skills boot camps can actually be used as reskilling opportunities. So it doesn't just have to be for people who are unemployed currently or looking for job opportunities, but they can actually be used for people inside of your organization now to reskill and do a boot camp. And if an apprenticeship feels like too long a period of time, great. Well, then a boot camp is much shorter, 12 weeks, you know, easy set of skills, but we are literally changing the makeup of the organizations, and people can pick up the skills that they know they're going to need for the future. I've had the privilege of kind of, you know, working a lot with people and building our technical skills, technology related skills. And I can personally say from my experiences, when people have learned technology related skills, they can fundamentally change the route that they want to go on in a career. And it also gives you as an employer a flexible model to consider your resourcing, so people can do more than what they used to.
That's great, Robbie. And I think one thing that I've seen from a tax perspective is that if you've got apprentices that are under the age of 25, the employer can also mitigate their national insurance costs there on the salary paid. So there's a double benefit potentially for engaging with apprenticeships and getting apprenticeships built into your model, which is great for employers to really think about.
And I think the other reality is, you know, in a recent survey as early as I think July this year, it was showing that employers were going out and 1 in 10 applicants had the skills required for the roles that they were looking for, which means that the people we're looking for, we have to train. They're not going to come in with the skills. So as a reality, one thing we need to consider is how are we going to help them to get those skills? You know, they're not going to have everything, and that's normal. We need to accept that, but we do need to consider how we train towards it. So definitely a key thing. And I do think that the double benefit to me is only something to enhance it.
That's great, Robbie, and thank you. And I suppose moving on to that future point, talk about training, which is to build the future. People need new skills. Christian, from your perspective, what will it look like, the future, from a people perspective?
It's a very difficult question to answer, Ian, with a short amount of time. So let me give you my view as to where I see it going, and it's that word transparency again. And I think we've got to be really reflective of, you know, what's going on a macro state. You know, we probably all have very few conversations around work without phrases like cost of living coming up, and we've got to think about how that impacts employees and how it actually maybe influences what's important to them. And also not looking at employees as a homogenous group. You know, as they move through their career, people may have different priorities, and, you know, as an employer, I guess we've got to have that flexibility as to how should we position ourselves, our proposition, to meet those changing demands. But we've seen recently, and it's quite an interesting story, I suppose, you know, Iceland, which according to the World Economic Forum has been voted, I think, for the last 14 years as the best country in the world for gender equality. Yet a couple of weeks ago, tens of thousands of women were on strike, including their prime minister, about gender equality issues. I think what's important about this is that we can say things and, you know, we can look at statistics, but actually, unless it's felt on the ground, unless your employees actually really believe in what it is that you're saying as an employer, eventually they are going to vote with their feet. And that's what they're seeing in Iceland at the minute. And as employees ask for more and more transparency to understand whether the values and the missions that you have on a website are actually the lived experience on a day-to-day basis, unless that gap's closed, it's going to be very difficult to build that trust which we need to, you know, keep people, the good people, in the business. So we've seen it in restaurants over recent years, and this, now I go to a local cafe for my lunch, and I know how many calories I'm going to consume, and those calories are probably going to be exactly what I'm actually going to have. I think that's what the future is going to eventually look like. Consistency and clear labeling, so that when somebody's applying for a job, when somebody's actually going into a new organization, they're going into one where the organization's been very honest and upfront about what it is. And there's the EU directive at the minute, which eventually I'm sure we'll see ramifications of that in the UK. But I think where organizations have a real opportunity to stand out from the rest at the minute is actually how can they create that honest and transparent EVP. And just to the point that Robbie's been talking about recently, because I think the training point is so important, and the apprenticeship levy is such an opportunity. And myself, I was very fortunate to get a level 7 apprenticeship levy and actually use the levy to do a master's, as Robbie was talking about. It's not just the training to upskill your teams to deliver great work, but actually it's the loyalty that I think that also builds in your workforce. So you train them, but then they actually want to stay with the organization as well. And Georgia made a great point. I think I read somewhere it takes 7 months or so really to actually replace somebody in the workplace. It's very costly, and you lose all of that incredible knowledge of how the organization operates. That's one of the hardest things, that tacit knowledge. So if you can build loyalty through trust and transparency, then I think you've got a very resilient organization for the future. But so many of the things that we could talk about. So let me pass back to you there, Ian.
No, that's great. I think, Christian, from what you've said there, it does sound like businesses need to, there's not going to be a place, there's going to be no hiding places. You can't have secrets anymore. You need to be transparent, honest, and really act as you say you are going to do, to make sure you can grow, you can recruit, and you can retain the right people for your business, and how you want to, behave really comes through those actions that you are taking. I think at this point, I'm probably going to go to what people's key takeaways are, because I'm conscious of time, and it'd be great to hear from everyone here. So Jane, your key takeaway, if you were going to give, someone some, your one bit of brilliance, the one brilliant bit of advice you could give in 30 seconds, what would that be, Jane?
Oh gosh, 30 seconds. Okay. I think my key takeaway would be, what's the quickest and easiest way you can do to reward your employees? And I think by looking at what salary sacrifice arrangement you can get in place to try and save not just themselves a little bit of money, but also the business as well. So that's my key takeaway.
Come to you next, Georgia.
Yeah, I think from a legal perspective, there's a lot of new obligations that are coming in for employers. So there's changes to flexible working that are coming into play next year. There's new obligations to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. So it's all coming down to a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. And it's been mentioned by nearly everyone in the call, but it is the C-suite from the top down, making sure your employers know the values. And it's not just I've got a flexible working policy and I've got working from home policy. I've got this kind of policy. It's actually embedding those values and making sure that everyone feels valued, because as we've touched on before, keeping those people and loyalty is a massive thing.
We move on to Robbie.
So I think shock and horror. my biggest thing is going to be about skilling your team. Think about the skills that the team need now and into the future, and how that's going to impact business continuity, succession planning, and the strategic workforce plan for the future.
And lastly, but not least, Christian.
Other than 45 minutes not being long enough to talk about the future of the workplace, I'd probably pick up the phone to Robbie and ask about the apprenticeship levy. But I think I'm going to echo Georgia. There are so many ideas, there are so many things that we've spoken about today that organizations can be thinking about, but don't have it on your vision board. Put these ideas into action. And I think that's what I'm seeing more and more people asking for at the minute is, this is what we want to do. How do we do it? And then communicating that out to your workforce, but delivering as well. It can't just be words anymore. It's got to be tangible material action.
That's great. Thank you, guys. That's been really, really enlightening from my perspective to hear all these different kind of experiences and thoughts on a really critical issue for businesses in the UK, to think how they can, survive to start with, can grow, and can then thrive. And we've had some other questions. It's good to have some time for questions to talk through what people have found interesting in this sense. And I think the first question from what I've seen, Robbie, is it right that anyone can be an apprentice?
So anyone can be an apprentice if they meet the requirements of the apprenticeship. So there are certain requirements to act as an apprentice. They are listed on the UK Gov site, but to just give some high level view. So obviously you need to be earning a wage and getting holiday pay. So, you know, as part of that, you might want to consider what that holiday pay looks like. And obviously considering national minimum wage is going to be a crucial thing, as Jane spoke about earlier. You do need to be living in England, or you know, if you go into Scotland, there is again a similar approach into Scotland. But again, principally, you know, where you live is key to this. Also, you can't be already studying in full-time education, so you couldn't be studying towards an existing master's and then, you know, you kind of transition and do both at the same time. And then the last thing is you need to have the time for the training. So there's a requirement. It used to be 20% of your time. It's now 6 hours, I think, per week is the new legislative breakdown. But those are the key requirements for anyone. But what I will say is, in terms of your organization, as I spoke about, you can go from, you know, directors in the organization right down to somebody who's new. So there is no boundaries in terms of age or, you know, in terms of how long people have worked in the firm and things like that. So those are just, I guess, the key considerations.
So I could go from a school leaver, starting an admin clerical role, let's say, on an apprentice, and 20 years later, I could still be on an apprentice as CEO of the business potentially.
Well, the joy is, Ian, everybody can do them, and you know, when you need the reskilling, that's what they're there for. And we as an organization, you know, have a huge amount of apprentices inside of the firm. And the reason we do that is because we just see the value of people coming through, starting, you know, becoming accountants in whatever profession, you know, going down a tax profession or going down audit, whatever it may be. But the value is that starts them on a journey which they can continue with. And if they wanted to pick up much like Christian spoke about earlier, if you wanted to pick up a leadership, an area focused around strategic leadership, guess what? Apprenticeship in strategic leadership. I mean, my favorite was I've got close friends who work in very, very niche industries, and we often have challenges of whether or not you could find an apprenticeship for those. And the reality is they all exist. It's just about finding the opportunities to use them.
Thank you. Just I suppose moving on from that point, another question is around, I suppose, contractual changes, Georgia. What do businesses need to think about, both from a holiday pay and potentially an apprenticeship position, if they've got employees moving into an apprenticeship, or because they've got to change the holiday pay definitions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, having it documented is the starting point. You know, there's a Section 1 requirement from the Employment Rights Act that, you know, all employees should have that statement, and it was updated in April 2020. So, everyone should now have those new contracts in place. But it's just making sure documenting, and, you know, if you're trying to agree changes with employees, obviously that's the starting point. You know, I won't go into the whole making changes of more than 20 and collective consultation, because that's outside the realms of this conversation. But, you know, apprenticeship contracts, making sure that they've got the training requirements in there, what happens at the end of that apprenticeship, etc. So it's just keeping on top of them, and it helps both parties to understand where the boundaries are, and you know what the timescales are, and what they're moving towards. So yeah, absolutely, just, you know, keeping on top of that is a priority.
Right. And I suppose moving on from that, Christian, the other area we touched upon was, I suppose, equality. Part of that conversation has been around gender pay gap reporting, and, you know, the transparency and analysis performed for that. What the businesses need to do from that perspective, and are there any other kind of pay reporting gaps they need to look at?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Any organisation with over 250 employees needs to be reporting their gender pay gap by April 1st. So don't be one of those 20% of organisations that misses the deadline. And, you know, once you get the actual information and you kind of analyze the data, it's a very doable piece of work. So always very happy to have a conversation around that. But it's the so what of it. It's now that we understand what our gender pay gap is, actually, what does that mean to us, and what does that mean to our employees, and how can we, again, as we've been speaking about quite a bit here, how can we put that into action so that it delivers change? But there's so much more beyond it as well. When we think about diversity, an organization should be reflective of its environment. And that diversity should expand beyond gender to ethnicity. And we should look at it from all perspectives. So I think there's a lot more that we can be doing, not just meeting the regulatory requirements, but actually thinking about it in the broader picture. And I'm sure over the next couple of years, and we're starting to see it now as well to a degree in organizations, but I'm sure over the next few years, there will be a real opportunity to see that advance across all industries.
That's great. That's great, Christian. Thank you for that. And the last question, Jane, you spoke briefly about salary sacrifice. Can businesses operate pension salary sacrifice? Is that something anyone can potentially look at doing? That's a
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all companies have pension schemes in place now through the auto enrolment. So yeah, it's quite easy just to implement a salary sacrifice scheme. Nothing changes in terms of the amount of pension contribution being paid by the employee, unless they want to increase it, of course. But it's just the way that it goes. It's implemented, so they give up part of their salary for the pension contributions, and rather than the employee pay pension contribution, the employer pays the whole contribution over to the pension provider, and therefore the employer receives, they pay less employer NIC, and the employee also pays, can reduce their tax as well. So yeah, it's really simple to implement, and quite a really quick and easy way of making a little bit of a saving.
A good way of saving national insurance for both the employee and employer, providing you don't put people in who might breach the minimum wage aspect.
Yeah, you've also got to keep minimum wage in the back of your mind at all times.
No, that's great. I think those are all our questions from the floor that we've had, and I thank everyone for the questions that have been provided to us. I think just to really finish off today, I appreciate everyone who's been listening on LinkedIn Live or has dialed in through Zoom. Really grateful for all the panelists and their thoughts and sharing their experiences today. It's been really good to hear from you all. And this is, like I said, this is the sort of halfway through our What's Next series. We do have some more events coming up. We've got another one on the 18th of November, which is looking at building business succession. And this session will be recorded, it is available, it can be shared with friends, colleagues, whoever you want, really. Not something I'll probably give as a Christmas present, but it's something that you can share willingly with people if it's been useful. And if you'd like to get in touch with any of us, please do. Very happy to answer any questions about ourselves from Mazar, and also Georgia from Gately's too. Very keen to support businesses and yourselves if you've got any issues or queries or things you think, that might be a good opportunity for us to look at. So lastly, I'm just going to thank everyone. Thank you for the team behind the scenes as well for supporting us getting this set up. And I wish everyone a wonderful day and rest of the week. So thank you very much all.